What did people eat on the Titanic? You know, before all that stuff went down. It all very literally depended on where you sat. First-class passengers had options that allowed for an array of flavor combinations. Second and third-class passengers had fewer choices, but no one went hungry, not even the iceberg. So, today we're going to take a look at what the passengers on the Titanic ate. But before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the Weird History channel. After that, please leave a comment and let us know what other historic culinary topics you would like to hear about. Okay, near, far, wherever you are, we believe your meal service will go on. There was a lot of ice cream on Titanic. 1,200 quarts to be exact. Wow, she really was the grandest ship ever built. But the type of ice cream varied by social class. After dinner, first-class passengers were served French ice cream for dessert, while second class was given American ice cream. French ice cream was considered better because it was made with egg, which made it richer and heavier, closer to custard. Elaborate desserts in first class, like French ice cream, were overseen by Adolph Mattman, listed among the crew as Iceman, not to be confused with the Top Gun character, at least as far as we know. There were 40,000 fresh eggs aboard Titanic. Fresh eggs? How many chickens were on board? First-class passengers enjoyed a multitude of egg dishes throughout the day. Fried, baked, poached, and boiled eggs were available for breakfast. And egg à la Argentea, a scrambled egg dish that included asparagus, was an option at lunch. Second-class passengers were fed fried eggs and grilled ham for breakfast, an option similar to what third-class eaters were given. In third class, however, they were simply served ham and eggs, with no information on how the items were prepared. The two ingredients may have been just slopped onto a plate, like a Waffle House at sea. Or I guess that'd be a Waffle Houseboat. Fresh, salted, and dried fish constituted 15,000 pounds of the total foodstuffs on Titanic. Herring, salmon, brill, haddock, and anchovy were all served in first class. The hoitiest of hoity-toity passengers could dine on smoked salmon alongside fresh herring, and fin and haddock for breakfast. That's showing the ocean who's boss. Lunch fish choices for first class included Norwegian anchovies, plain and smoked sardines, soused herrings, and salmon mayonnaise, served buffet style. Soused herrings, also known as hammered or unemployed herrings, were prepared by soaking the fish in wine or vinegar before cooking and were served cold. Meanwhile, salmon mayonnaise is pretty much what it sounds like. At the end of the day, first-class passengers ate salmon with cucumber and mousseline sauce, which is similar to hollandaise sauce, all as an early dinner course. Shrimp and oysters were also available in first class. In second class, fish including Yarmouth bloaters, a type of cold smoked herring, were served at breakfast and dinner. For dinner, second-classers could sink their teeth into baked haddock in a sharp sauce made of brown sugar, onion, tomato paste, mustard, hot pepper, and Worcestershire. Third-class passengers had one fish choice in a day, smoked herring at breakfast, and anyone who complained about it was presumably thrown overboard. Sweet spreads like jelly, marmalade, and jam were common meal staples on Titanic, but your selection varied depending on your passenger class. Man, you gotta buy an upgrade to get jam? Sounds like Spirit Airlines. Third-class passengers had marmalade at breakfast and a sweet sauce served at dinner, while second-class diners enjoyed marmalade with additional wine jelly. In first class, along with chartreuse jelly, they could choose from blackcurrant conserve, Narbonne honey, and Oxford marmalade at their morning meal. Oxford marmalade, Frank Cooper's version of the traditional British spread, was made from oranges, syrup, sugar, and pectin. All of the sweet spreads would have been eaten on fresh bread, something everyone aboard Titanic could find in abundance. There were 10,000 pounds of cereal on board the Titanic. That is a lot of Captain Crunch. For breakfast and steerage, oatmeal was used to make porridge, and the evening gruel could have been made from any grain, such as rye, wheat, rice, or oats. Other cereals and grains included corn used in bread and buckwheat made into cakes. Quaker oats were available at the first-class breakfast on Titanic, alongside puffed rice, another item made by the Quaker Oats Company. Quaker really wanted in on the ground floor of Titanic. Incidentally, Walter Donald Douglas, whose father owned a cereal mill in Iowa that later became part of Quaker Oats, was on board Titanic and served as an executive at the company. Douglas perished on Titanic after watching his wife and their maid board a lifeboat. He reportedly refused to join them, claiming that to leave the ship before all of the women and children were safe would make him less than a man. Of course, he'd just been cooped up with them for 5 days. Maybe he just needed a break. Douglas was played by actor Desmond Roberts in a brief scene in a 1958 movie about the Titanic disaster called A Night to Remember. He did not, however, make it into the James Cameron film. With 1,000 pounds of grapes on Titanic, there were plenty to go around. Fresh fruits, including hothouse grapes, were present at breakfast for first-class passengers and at lunch and dinner for diners in second class. But of course, the way grapes were served was very different. First-class passengers were given grape scissors for the task. There were anywhere from 100 to 1,500 pairs of the specialty dining tools aboard Titanic. Wouldn't want the Astors to sprain their fingers plucking grapes. Meanwhile, second-class passengers had to pull grapes off the bunch by hand. In addition to 1,000 pounds of grapes, Titanic had 180 boxes of oranges, 50 boxes of lemons, and 50 boxes of grapefruit. Evidently, the juice man Jay Cordich was on board. Fruit was served to passengers in first, second, and third class, at multiple meals a day for the higher classes. With 36,000 pounds of apples on board, first-class passengers were treated to baked apples in the morning, meringue apples at lunch, and applesauce at dinner with roast duckling. But if diners wanted something different, they could eat peaches in chartreuse jelly. For a fruity dessert, Titanic featured peaches, sugar, chartreuse liqueur with gelatin alongside cinnamon, cloves, and lemon juice. It may have even been served on French ice cream. Second class had fruit options at all 3 meals, although they were much less elaborate. Third class was given fruit at dinner, but it's unclear how it was presented. Who knows, the crew may have just chucked apples at them. Speaking of sweet treats, Titanic had a decent selection of pudding for her passengers. In first class, custard pudding, which is similar to creme brulee, was made with eggs, sugar, milk, and varying flavors, and served at lunchtime. Meanwhile, Waldorf pudding, which traditionally included fruits and nuts mixed into a vanilla pudding, was a dessert choice at dinner. Second class got tapioca pudding for lunch and plum pudding for dinner, while steerage had to settle for just the plum pudding. But in fairness, you never really settle for pudding. Pudding is always welcome. In first class, soup was one of many courses served at dinner. In third class, however, soup or stew could serve as the primary dish. Consommé fermier and kokiliki opened lunch in first class on April 14th, the doomed ship's final day, while the soup choices were cream of barley or consommé Olga. Consommé fermier was probably a vegetable broth, because fermier means farmer in French. Unless, of course, it was farmer soup. Probably not, but maybe. Kokiliki featured leeks, chicken stock, perhaps some rice or barley, and additional seasoning. Cream of barley soup was most likely made with beef or chicken stock, barley, diced vegetables, and lots of fresh cream. Consommé Olga was a somewhat lighter option, made out of beef stock, tomato puree, vegetables, and beef. Second-class passengers were served pea soup for lunch, while steerage ate rice soup at mid-afternoon dinner. Isn't rice soup just wet rice? Where's your imagination, Chef Titanic? You can't have a decadent meal without plenty of starch, and Titanic had a boatload of it. Listen, you knew there was going to be a boat pun eventually. Don't get mad. Titanic had 40 tons of potatoes on board. At breakfast, first class could choose to eat mashed, sautéed, or jacket potatoes, comparable to the choices of mashed and fried potatoes in second class. Second class could also eat American dry hash au gratin, a smothered and covered mixture of corned beef, potatoes, butter, and cheese. Third class had one potato option for breakfast, jacket potatoes, also known as baked potatoes. What kind of jacket? We don't know. Probably members only. Dinner and steerage could also include boiled potatoes with meat and various vegetables. At lunch, first class again had a choice of potatoes served mashed, fried, or baked. For dinner, first passengers ate filet mignon Lily, a piece of meat served on sliced, buttered potatoes. Another potato option included chateau potatoes, oval-shaped potatoes often served with béarnaise sauce. Even more spud choices, including parmentier and boiled new potatoes, were served diced and whole. You were never far from a potato on Titanic. That was their slogan, probably. Meanwhile, the wide selection of bread on Titanic was a testament to the diversity of the ship's culinary influences and her passengers. While Titanic departed with 1,000 loaves, the kitchen crew still baked fresh bread each day, providing bread at every meal for all classes. In steerage, fresh bread and butter were offered at breakfast, as was something called Swedish bread, the exact recipe for which remains unknown. Fresh bread was served at dinner along with cabin biscuits, essentially a cracker that was served at late supper as well. At tea, steerage passengers dined on fresh bread and butter with cold meat, cheese, and pickles. Second-class passengers had biscuits at lunch and dinner, and soda scones, buckwheat cakes, and Vienna and graham rolls at breakfast. First class enjoyed similar bread options, with additional sultana scones and cornbread options available. One item served in steerage that didn't appear anywhere else on the ship was tripe, the lining of an animal's stomach. While the dish is typically boiled, on Titanic it was fried and served with onions to give your breath that rustic hot dog factory scent. Meanwhile, up in first class, lamb and mutton were both served at breakfast. Diners in first class could also have mutton chops, grilled to order at breakfast and lunch. A dinner of lamb with mint sauce was served to first and second class passengers on April 14th, hours before the ship plowed into the iceberg. Third class passengers were not given lamb or mutton at any time of day. You can't serve lamb in steerage. What would the Queen think? Altogether, there were 75,000 pounds of fresh meat on Titanic. That meant plenty of cuts of beef. In first class, passengers had several choices each meal, including filet mignon and sirloin of beef. For lunch, first-class passengers could enjoy roast beef or spiced beef, with cold meats and sirloin steaks to order offered at dinner. In second class, roast beef was served with ox tongue and sausage at lunch. Nothing like meat with a side of meat, except maybe some extra meat on the side. But in steerage, the solitary beef option was roast beef and brown gravy. Meat, potatoes, soup, vegetables, and a nice plum pudding would have been more than sufficient, if not extravagant. Other meats in first class included kidneys, bacon, and ham, which was served no fewer than 4 ways. 7,500 pounds of ham and bacon and 25,000 pounds of poultry were served on the ship, including corned beef, chicken, and turkey as popular meal choices in second class. Titanic also carried kosher meat for its diners. Maybe they should have dumped some of that meat and brought more lifeboats, although certain cuts of beef would have made a pretty sweet raft. So what do you think? Which of these Titanic meals sounds most appetizing to you? Let us know in the comments below, and while you're at it, check out some of these other videos from our weird history.